Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you this morning. I must say I feel a bit emotional because exactly 20 years ago, I immigrated to the US, and I joined Forrester Research as a tech analyst. And the very first topic that I began to cover was R&D and innovation management. So I fell in love with that topic, and the love actually kept growing. And even today, it's one of my most passionate topics, even though I've kind of expanded my repertoire to cover other things. So I'm kind of very delighted to be here with you to share a passion that we both share, which is innovation management. The vision that Arid presented earlier, I think creates a golden opportunity for all of you to realize your fullest potential as what I call a full stack innovator. What the heck is a full stack innovator? Is that another kind of a jargon I'm throwing at you? So let me kind of use the metaphor of an iceberg to illustrate this point. The next 2 days, we'll be hearing a lot of great advances in technology like AI and data science that will potentially help you reinvent fundamentally your products, services, and even your processes. That's fantastic. But in my opinion, that's just what I call level 1 innovation that gives you tactical competitive advantage because your competition can easily use the same technologies to develop better products, services, and processes. This is why you need to master the next level of innovation, which is reinventing your company's business models. And later today, there's a session on that very topic of business model innovation that I encourage you to attend. Many of you, I would say, have mastered these 2 levels of innovation, which is fantastic. But now, I want to encourage you and even challenge you to now go deeper than that and master the 3rd level of innovation, which is about helping change the mental models, that is the mindset of your organizations. Only then, I believe, you can achieve strategic competitive advantage for your organization. And my talk today is actually help you evolve from what I call a smart innovation manager to the future you who could become a wise innovation leader. The good news is that I identified 4 strategic levers you can use to actually evolve into a wise innovator. They have to do with frugality, sustainability, agility, and diversity. So let me kind of deep dive into each of these 4 pillars. The first one is frugality. Now, I know that frugality and innovation don't go together, and they almost seem like, an oxymoron, right? Frugal, innovation, how can they be together, right? Well, let me kind of reframe frugality from a different perspective, from the perspective of the customers. You may be in the B2B field, so let's look at the end customers, end users you're serving. The sad news is we live in the richest country in the world, but it turns out that 65% Americans cannot find $500 to meet a medical emergency. And this chart simply shows the percentage of children who earn more than their parents, which has gradually declined. And of course, this became a big problem for millennials. I'm a Gen X, so of course the millennials curse us, my generation, that we didn't create the American dream from them, which had become an American nightmare. But the real American nightmare is going to be experienced by the Gen Z, who are not only digital natives, but they are digitally debt native as well. As you can see, the Gen Z represent 32% of the global population this year, and they're already loaded with debt, about $4,000 on average. So that's the first phenomenon happening, which is that more and more customers are becoming more value conscious because essentially the resources are constrained. But there's something else happening, which is going to be even more kind of epic in proportion, which is actually the gradual shift of middle class consumption from the Western world to the eastern part of the world. So in about 30 years, 50% of the global middle class will be living in India and China. And this is going to be important because unlike the consumers in the Western world, Europe and America, many of these billions of almost 3 billion consumers actually in Asia will still be relatively earning less than us, and therefore will be more value conscious and demand actually products that are more affordable and at the same time greater quality. And there's a session, I think, tomorrow also on China that I invite you to attend, because China is not only an important emerging market for you, but it's also an emerging source of disruptive innovation. So I really want you to pay attention there, because today we kind of fret about the GAFA, especially established companies, right? You fret about the GAFA, but you should also fret about Alibaba and Tencent. And I think these guys are going to really, really disrupt everything we know. But so what do? Well, you have to proactively learn to adapt and adapt to innovation strategies to succeed in the emerging markets. And one company that has done successfully over the past more or less 17 years now is Renault Nissan. That began in 2004 when they launched a $5,000 car called Logan. This was Gerard Detroube, the head of the program, which developed that in Romania, far away from Paris, their headquarters, using engineers in Romania, right, post-communist country, so they know exactly how to do better with less. So they produced this $5,000 car, Logan, and initially destined for emerging markets, but to the surprise became a huge success story in Western world, Western Europe. And then they expanded this into a whole new product line called Dacia. And Dacia has now become the cash cow of this company, accounting for 40% of total revenues. And they've sold over 5 million units since 2004. But they didn't rest on the laurels. They actually dispatched Gerard to go to Chennai. I was there actually last Friday, and indeed I can confirm that the traffic condition looked like that, to actually set up a new R&D team from scratch and actually build a whole ecosystem to actually design not just a car, but a whole new car platform called CMF, Common Module Family, affordable. And the idea was essentially to use it as a foundation to create whole new models of cars, initially destined for emerging markets, but potentially can find marketplace outlet in the Western world as well. The first car that came out of it was Kwid, which is a crossover priced at $4,000, designed entirely out of India. And this was a great success story in 2015 when it was launched. But now, so far, I talked about frugality from the perspective of affordability, which is important. But what if you start marrying affordability and sustainability? Indeed, using the same platform out of India and with engineers in China, they are now going to develop or launch in the next 2 years an $8,000 EV, which is going to be initially destined for emerging markets, but could find outlet in mature economies as well. And this Frugal Innovation actually has enabled Renault to propel itself #1 slot in global sales in 2017, ahead of the global leaders Toyota and Volkswagen. So this is a way of thinking about leveraging frugality to innovate and grow. General Electric is another company that has successfully leveraged frugality to the advantage. GE Healthcare actually has used India and China to fundamentally reinvent all the products by coming up, for example, with the low-cost ECG devices that not only cost 10 times less than what we have in the West, but you see the form and function, it's portable. It's more energy efficient, more durable, so the doctor actually can carry it with him or her to go visit the patients, okay? And also they came up with a low-cost portable V-scan. It's called V-scan. It's a portable ultrasound device. And again, initially destined for emerging markets, but also has become a success story in the Western world as well. So these kind of successes actually led General Electric actually to then expand frugality to create a whole new business unit called the Sustainable Healthcare Solutions. And this was initially led by Terry Bressenham, who was the head of this program. And last year, she got promoted to become head of innovation at GE Healthcare out of Boston, actually. And so what is this HSS about? Actually, it's about identifying new ways to serve the needs of nearly 6 billion people worldwide who today don't have decent healthcare access. But what's exciting is that the strategy here is not to say, I'm going to develop myself all these solutions, but actually find creative ways to build partner ecosystems with unusual people they never worked with before, like hospitals, NGOs, but also government agencies, and a lot of startups as well. And what is exciting is that they are really pioneering whole kind of business models. For example, rather than selling a device as a capital equipment, what if you rent it or lease it and use a pay-per-scan model, okay? I just came back from India. I visited John Welsh Technology Center in Bangalore, which is the second largest center, R&D center of GE in India. And I can tell you that I still haven't processed what I saw. It's mind-boggling. The future of GE is being written right there by technology leaders who are fundamentally going to challenge not just the business model of GE, but the mental model of GE. Essentially forcing GE to ask itself, who am I? What is my core identity? It's just mind-boggling. So why this is mind-boggling? Because the kind of solutions, these frugal solutions we're developing in poor countries could also be relevant for rich countries. This is called reverse innovation, right? And the reason is because today America spends most on healthcare compared to all other developing countries, and yet the output and the performance is very lousy, as you know. And in 2020, healthcare will account for 20% of the country's GDP, which is essentially unsustainable. So we need to figure out a way to do better with less in US healthcare. And I think that emerging markets like India and China will give us some lessons. So what's the takeaway here? The key takeaway for you is this. You have mastered the art of selling to the 500 million consumers who are in the middle class, upper middle class. Okay? You have mastered that. Now your task is to master the art of frugal innovation so you can serve this untapped market of nearly 5 billion mid-income and low-income consumers. And by the way, as I said earlier, these mid-income, low-income consumers don't just live in the so-called poor countries. Many of them actually exist right here in the United States. So think about that. This is going to be, again, the full stack innovation, right? You have to do both, right? Just ask Apple, and I would like to know what the answer is. So let's move to the next pillar, which is sustainability, right? So everybody knows that the clock is ticking. We only have 11 years left to address the climate change crisis, to keep the global temperature from rising above 2 degrees. And you can either see it as a threat, or you can see it as an opportunity to embrace the principles of what we call the circular economy to fundamentally reinvent your entire value chain and even your business models. And I believe today, later, there is also a session on circular economy that I encourage you to attend. This is going to be really revolutionary. And it's going to set, okay, let me ask you this. How many of you are first familiar with the circular economy? Okay, half of you. That's fantastic. How many of you actually are implementing these principles? About a fourth. Okay. I really, really encourage you to attend the session today because this is going to be game-changing. And interestingly, Europe and China are way ahead in the US in this area. And why, for you particularly, this is an extraordinary opportunity to really shine your organization is because innovation, actually, and R&D particularly, is going to play a crucial role in driving circular economy. Why? You know the stat very well. 70% of the life cycle cost of a product, right, is determined in the R&D stage up front. But not only life cycle cost, economic cost, but the environmental cost also, right, is determined in the R&D stage. Hence, the strategic importance of R&D in building a circular enterprise. And this is why I'm pleased to share this example of Target, which is a world-leading flooring solutions provider. Probably the carpet here comes from them. Or the rival interface. Both of them are big proponents of the circular enterprise, circular economy. And I like my friend Anne-Christine Ayed. I like her title, you see, because she's simultaneously responsible for R&D, which is a science part. She's a chemist by training, but also innovation in the broader sense, not just product and services, but also business model innovation. And then more importantly, she's also in charge of sustainability. Okay? And she's actually in charge of operationalizing the vision of Target to become a circular enterprise by 2020. That means by 2020, they will become a zero-waste company, no industrial waste going to landfills, and 99% of the products will be completely recoverable and recyclable. And so what she's trying to do essentially is three things. One is to phase out all the petroleum-based inputs, raw materials, and go to renewable, easily renewable materials, eliminate all the toxic materials that cause indoor pollution because they sell to hospitals and schools. And then thirdly, use what we call the cradle-to-cradle design principles to design new products in a way that at the end of the life cycle, the materials inside can easily be recovered and used to make new products. So that's something that I think is very exciting, right? The role of R&D and innovation managers to shape the circular strategy for the enterprise. But here's a reality check, especially in America that I learned the last 5 years, is that saving the planet, saving the world is fantastic. That's called sustainability, right? But we still live in a consumerist society where people are looking for value for money. So your mandate, therefore, is to translate sustainability, which is saving the planet, into value for customers. Okay? And one company where the head of innovation has done very well is Impossible Foods. As you know, they make this plant-based burger, Impossible Burger, which actually saves a lot in terms of water, land, reduces drastically emissions, and is way more healthier than the beef burger. And that's all exciting, but here is a challenge. The challenge is that this company was founded by a Stanford professor, Pat Brown, who has this kind of lofty vision to eliminate all animals from the food chain by 2035. That's fantastic. But then how do you turn that into reality, right? And this is where David Lipton, the head of innovation, and Greg, actually the head of supply chain, come into play, because they have to essentially make sure that they innovate at every level, products and the supply chains, essentially, to bring the solution, the product, to a price point that is affordable and accessible for the consumers. And it took them 7 years. When I was first eating that in Palo Alto in California, first of all, you can only find it in one restaurant in the whole Bay Area, and it cost $15, right? Fast forward last year, they cut a deal with White Castle, the oldest burger chain in America, where they're now selling it for $2 in the 400 retail stores of White Castle. And then more excitingly, last week, they made a deal with Burger King to actually bring the Impossible Whopper to potentially thousands of stores around the world. Okay? So they essentially managed to combine sustainability and affordability. So this brings me to the important takeaway for you, especially in America, I have to say this, which is that American consumers want to have the cake and eat it too. They won't have it both ways. In other words, they are looking for 7 actually important attributes in all products that you will be selling in the future. 3 of them are foundational, that are non-negotiable. These have to do with affordability, accessibility, and simplicity. I just have to go to neighborhood, White Castle or burger chain, to actually get a burger. But at the same time, their aspirations, especially millennials and Gen Z, right? They have higher aspirations, new value set, where they're actually looking for quality, but not quality in terms of performance, but improving the quality of experience and the quality of life, like well-being, for example, in the case of healthcare. And then at the same time, they're looking for something which is more aspirational. Desirability is going to be very important. And then finally, you have the sustainability, which is right there. And these are aspirational attributes. But you see, the problem is that, you have to reconcile these attributes, right? Because, as I say, the consumers want the aspirational attributes in the products at the same time at the price point that is, accessible to them. So this is going to be a challenge, right? How do you reconcile these 6 or 7 attributes? Purpose, of course, is there. But as I say, in the case of Impossible Burger, right, customers don't care about it, right? I mean, it's nice to save the planet and eliminate animals, but ultimately, they care about the bottom 3 attributes. So your challenge or your mission actually is to find a way, innovative way, to reconcile the 6 or 7 attributes. Now, the third pillar has to do with agility. Now, I know that agility is something that I've been obsessed about myself for the past 20 years. I've written a lot about how to make supply chains agile, et cetera. And the last 7 years, I've been looking at how do you build an agile culture in organizations. But I learned, the lesson is that essentially, if you want to have an agile culture, you also need to have an agile structure, right? They go together. And here I want to talk about one company, which is a Chinese company, which is actually rewriting the textbook on management. It's Haier. Haier is the world-leading consumer appliance company. They bought GE Appliances a few years ago. And this company is mind-boggling because they don't have a dedicated R&D team or manufacturing or customer service. Instead, they have 2,500 cross-functional teams they call micro-enterprises. And they are empowered to sense and respond to new market needs and use the scale of Haier to deliver quickly the solution the market needs in a matter of weeks. So for example, why this is important. So the flexibility here is not just only in the structure, in the mindset. So there was a time when there was a farmer who complained that the washing machine gets clogged. So when the technician went to see what's happening, they discovered the farmer was using the washing machine to wash potatoes as well. Okay? So of course, you might be like, are you stupid? You haven't read the user manual, right? I mean, it says clearly wash clothes, not potatoes, right? But these are like wise innovators. So they ask themselves, wait a second, maybe he's not the only guy trying to do that. Maybe there's a market opportunity for that. So this idea came from one cross-functional team that they owned this problem and they turned the problem into a solution. And they introduced a washing machine that also washes potatoes, and it became a bestseller in China, okay? Within a matter of, I think, 7-8 weeks, in 2 months, okay? From problem identification, turn it into an opportunity, and then capture the opportunity in 6 weeks, 7 weeks. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is this. In the 20 years I spent in large companies like yourself, especially I live in Silicon Valley, there is this BS going around saying like, well, you have to think and act like a startup. That's baloney. I mean, that's the worst advice you can get, right? Because you spend decades building scale, right? So what I recommend instead is to figure out a way like Hire to integrate efficiency, which is scale, and flexibility, okay? And this is going to be very, very important. And I think that Arijit beautifully laid it out, right? This notion of operational innovation and expense innovation. They are not mutually exclusive, okay? You have to change probably your structure, governance model, et cetera, to accommodate both. And one way to do that, I think, is try to be flexible on the customer-facing activities and try to be brutally efficient on delivery side, okay? Because the customer-facing side has to become more and more, dynamic, more flexible because of not only changing needs of customers, but the changing aspirations and the values, especially with the rise of emerging markets, right? So that flexibility has to be on the customer-facing side. But brutal efficiency on the delivery side. And on a lighter note, metaphorically, what does it mean is that, so Arijit actually talked about buckling up as you speed up. You can do even better than that. You can try to change the tires while driving at full speed. And there's a YouTube video you can watch. It's not a fake. This is happening in Saudi Arabia, where the teenagers, their pastime is this, driving at full throttle while replacing the tires. So you have to kind of become like that. So good luck doing that. So I don't drive, so I don't want to do that. But so then we come to the last but most exciting kind of part, pillar, which has to do with diversity. Now, this is very important, folks, because, I always go meet, last, 25 years ago, I wrote my thesis on open innovation before it was known as such. But the problem with open innovation is that we try to open up the company to the input of startups and, crowdsourcing, et cetera. But when you do that, what happens is that the kind of ideas you bring in, more importantly, the kind of perspectives you bring in tend to reinforce what you already know, right? But what if you use open innovation to bring in people that will fundamentally challenge the perspective of your organization? And this is what Fujitsu has done by setting up about 4 years ago something called the Open Innovation Gateway, which is based in Sunnyvale, California, headed by my friend Moi Ahmed. And it's a very small unit, only 4 people. But what they do is they have set up an open innovation network. I'm part of that, along with other experts. And we are very diverse in our backgrounds. We could be sociologists, we could be designers, we could be academics, not just technologists. And we don't want technologists to be part of the network. What we do actually is that Fujitsu will bring in a client, and the client will come and say, oh, Silicon Valley is awesome. I'm a bank. I'm a retailer. So tell me how we can use AI to radically transform our business model. We say, stop. You see, because the first step is to learn, right? Learn about themselves. So we kind of challenge them to redefine who they are actually. Are you really a bank? Are you a retailer, right? And through a process, there's a structured process there, over a 2-day period, we kind of challenge them. It's called deconstruct before you reconstruct, right? We kind of deconstruct the sense of self, which sometimes becomes too rigid, so that they challenge themselves, question themselves, and figure out that actually they are more than what they thought they were. And that opens up to the second phase, which is really about creating. Because most of these kind of 1-week-long customer kind of workshops, they go straight to the create, which is very dangerous, right? So first, you have to learn about yourself first, and then you realize that you can be more than just being a bank or just a retailer. And then we start the fun part, which is actually business model innovation, which then leads to the notion of creation, where you actually create a new business model or a new process, et cetera. So this has become so successful in the last 4 years. They helped hundreds of Fujitsu customers to go to this process that Harvard Business Review, Harvard Business School, has written several case studies on them, which have become some of the most downloaded case studies. Now, why I say that? Because when it comes to open innovation, which is a topic very close to my heart, make sure that you use open innovation not just to reinforce what you know, but to fundamentally open your minds and your organization's mind as well. Because Deloitte study shows that when your innovation team is extremely diverse in terms of mindset and perspectives, you can actually be 6 times more agile in bringing new ideas to marketplace, faster, better. But also you can be 8 times better in terms of your financial performance as well. So in summary, I was on time. I feel good about it. I was a bit nervous about it. So in summary, I would say that use these 4 levers to evolve into a wise innovator, right? These are going to be extremely important. Frugality, for the reason I explained, sustainability, and agility, and then, of course, diversity. And I really encourage you to challenge yourself so you can expand your sense of identity and deepen your purpose. So you can actually evolve and, first of all, manage and master this full stack innovation, and also evolve from a smart innovation manager to a wise innovation leader, like these execs have done, the examples I gave you earlier. And I want to leave you with this word from Daru Kanwala, the former CTO of BP, who beautifully says that innovation managers like yourself have to evolve into wise strategists who are part business-minded, part diplomat, part parent, and part psychologist. What he's really trying to say is that the hard skills you have, you don't have to prove them anymore. We know you have them. But increasingly in a global and complex world, the soft skills are going to become more and more important to basically deliver more value to organization and also future-proof your own career as well. So unfortunately, we are kind of running out of time, so I won't be able to address your questions now, but I will be here the whole day, and I would love to interact with you informally and address any questions you might have. So thank you very much for your attention, and thanks for being here.